can start. So in about, we'll give it another minute and a half or so. So just so everybody knows, this webinar is brought to you by Bridge Legal and HR Solutions. We're a law firm located in Toronto, Ontario. Now, we're not only a law firm, we also provide services such as HR consulting and workplace investigation services to our clients throughout Ontario, but also throughout Canada as well. Most recently, we've been working out in Alberta and British Columbia as well. So if you've got any questions about any provinces, or if you've got any jurisdictional questions, we're more than happy to help as far as any employment law goes, but human resource consulting and workplace investigations as well. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to start. So we've got a number of people who have joined us here. I just thought I'd take this moment to introduce this webinar. So today we'll be talking about harnessing your people power, or how HR can improve your business. Our chief goal really will be to discuss HR as an internal department, but also HR from an external consulting perspective. So an external HR consultant. So to that end, we've just decided to bring this webinar to all of you and discuss some of the advantages and options that you might have for your business. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Jandre Ljubicic. I'm an employment lawyer working with Bridge Legal and HR Solutions. I've been an employment lawyer for just over 4 years. This has been my only field of practice through my years of law experience. And with me here is Denise, who's going to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Kuhn. I'm a HR consultant at Bridge Legal and HR Solutions. I have about 20 plus years experience, so pretty much lived and breathed HR. And looking forward to just joining Jandre today and chatting to you about HR and employment law.
Great, thanks, Denise. And Denise, can you just run us through what topics we'll be discussing today and what the purpose of the webinar is?
Yeah, firstly, common myths about HR. There's so many negative stereotypes and perceptions about HR, which we'll highlight and explain is not the case. We'll look at HR's purpose and go through the main functions of HR and explain just how involved and versatile this role is. We'll look at the 5 key reasons why HR is important and identify how HR dedicates its time and energy into building the company brand and culture, as well as the team. We'll look at how outsourced HR consultants can help you shift your focus back on the business while providing comfort, knowing that the HR side of things are done and taken care of. And finally, when HR needs to consult with an employment lawyer for their expert advice, and this is usually obviously to do with anything that we need to find out more information in terms of compliance and also to help the organization reduce risk.
Great, thanks, Denise. So I thought the first item that we really need to get down is what are some common myths about HR. So to that end, we've actually prepared a quick poll for everybody that we just like to get your opinion on. So I'm just going to launch the poll right now. And if everybody can give us their responses, I'm sure we're going to have a variety of responses here. So I'm going to launch the poll right now. And let me know if that's come up for you, Denise, as well.
Yeah.
That's great. So the question is, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you get called to HR? Is it because you're getting a promotion, because they just want to chat, because you're in trouble, or because you're getting fired? Now, we'll just give everybody maybe about 30 seconds so I can gauge what everybody thinks happens when they get called to HR. Okay. So far, the consensus is that everybody thinks they're in trouble if they get called to HR. And that's not very much a surprise. I think that's kind of what we expected from this poll as well. So HR is often described as the fun police, or you have to watch out for them because they only represent management and they're really only there to fire and discipline people and to make everybody's life a little bit less better at work. Well, we don't agree that those are the functions of HR. There are some false perceptions out there. And of course, some scenarios, they might be amusing, but more often than not, it's a frustrating scenario to be in as an HR person, to be walking past your colleagues perhaps and think, oh, that person could fire me tomorrow or something like that. So there is a sense that trust needs to be built between HR and employees within the workplace in order to ensure that HR is integrated and considered to be a part of the everyday workplace. So HR really does do discipline and it does do determination, but there's so much more that HR does beyond that. Mm-hmm. So the question is really, what is the role of an internal HR department or even external HR consultant, and what is it that they do on a day-to-day basis, and how does that assist your business, especially with time management and being able to, keep a motivated and happy workplace while also ensuring that it's all cost effective and done right. So Denise, I think one big item, of course, is documentation, which we talk about all of the time. So what is it about documentation that really is really required from an HR perspective?
Yeah, documentation, gosh, this is a vast amount of documentation involved in HR. And for an owner of a small to medium-sized business, it can just take a great deal of time and, of course, can be quite overwhelming. Owners need to know also the documentation that needs to be in place that's mandatory, like your policies, your employee records, training records, just to ensure they are compliant. And documentation, if it's done completely or thoroughly, and all the right steps are followed, it's going to help the owner minimize risks when it comes to grievances, wrongful termination claims, and even fines. Some of the admin tasks are pretty straightforward and can be done by an internal person. But of course, there are other areas when HR consultant is needed to provide that expert opinion and advice.
Great. Thanks, Denise. And I mean, HR, as far as documentation goes, one part that documentation serves is compliance and ensuring that you have evidence of compliance. So employers are required to keep track of legislative requirements. So that can include policies like workplace violence policies in Ontario, workplace harassment policies in Ontario, and in other provinces as well. Ontario has specific posters that need to be displayed in the workplace. The Occupational Health and Safety Act needs to be posted. And these kinds of contextual requirements sometimes vary by the size of business. And, it may be required for one business because they have reached a threshold of employees, or another business may not require it, another workplace may not require it. HR is really there to look at the context, look at what's required, because they have intimate knowledge of what's going on in the workplace and what the workplace is really like, to check and make sure that you're all in line. And quite often what happens is that if you're not compliant, there's cumulative issues. If you're not compliant on this, you could be non-compliant on a bunch of other stuff, and this stuff gathers up, and all of a sudden you're looking at a bill or a penalty or something that you didn't think was even coming. It was really without even knowledge of the owner. But had they had someone in place to just keep track of that over time and keep track of legislative changes and keep track of developments, they would have gotten ahead of it. And I think that's key here. HR is really here to get ahead of the issues and make sure that the business is not reacting to every event after it happens, but really there to be proactive and to ensure that everything's in place so that when the trouble arises, you're already ready to respond to it because you've already done all the paperwork, you're already compliant, you've got the records of everything that you've done and all the trainings that you've had to do. And getting into training, health and safety is a particular focus of legislation across Canada. Every jurisdiction in Canada has health and safety legislation that requires various types of training that depends on the business type, depends on the risks involved at the particular work site. Construction site will have different from a office environment or even from a retail store. So what HR can do is they can line up the trainings that are necessary to make sure everybody's up to date on what they need to be. If there's some kind of occupational health and safety experts that need to train staff, those can be brought in. HR can communicate with those and bring them in, and then they can keep records of all of the trainings, make sure that the trainings are done on time. If there's some things that may require annual training or may require training on an ongoing basis, you want to keep a record and you want to have some repository of those records. HR is the perfect place to keep those. And generally speaking, workplace injuries are a big cost to businesses, not only in terms of cost to lost work time and employees going off on leaves because they need time to take care of themselves, but also they can have serious and life-altering consequences for the employees themselves in some scenarios. And that can cause, morale to drop in the workplace and various other issues. Ultimately, the impact could be damages to business productivity, finances, and reputations. No business wants to be in the news media for having a catastrophic accident occur in their workplace that could have been prevented. And that's one key aspect of where HR can assist. They can make sure that the training is there to prevent that kind of damage to business reputation, to productivity and finances. But besides compliance, businesses also have to look at how do we bring in the right employees and how do we keep those employees? And one part that HR consultants and in-house HR departments are frequently involved in is recruitment and selection. So Denise is going to tell us a little bit what's really involved in recruitment and selection. What does HR do from that side?
Yeah, so recruitment is so important. People are your greatest assets. And, for a business owner, it may seem straightforward to post a job and hire an employee. But if it's not handled well, it can certainly be time consuming and costly, as well as increase your risk if you haven't taken into consideration all the legal issues when it comes to employment, equity, and even human rights code. Mm-hmm. You want to also be careful not to damage your brand. So when you're hiring people and they have a negative experience, they're likely going to tell their friends and colleagues and family members. So you want to be careful about that and make sure you get back to every single person that you have interviewed, because there are a lot of times where we don't and we forget and we just get carried on with the person we want to hire. But it's so vital that we treat everyone with respect. You want to make a great first impression when a new hire comes on board. So a slapdash onboarding experience is going to have negative results. Things like employee not being able to be set up for success. They will be negative over time. It can affect interaction with customers where they're just not given the right service. And then it's costly. If the employees are leaving and you have to replace them, so the hiring and the retraining, it takes a lot of time and it's a lot of money. So HR is there and they can take care of all these needs for you. Basically ensuring also that you're compliant. They play an important role in building your brand as employer of choice. And implementing tools and resources for your leadership team and your new hire. Good.
Thank you. So that kind of leads us to the next section of recruitment and the retention part of the discussion, which is really training and development. So Denise, in terms of training and development, how does HR help in that sphere?
Yeah, again, I want to say training is also so important. Like recruitment is important, but it's like you attract the person, but you also want to make sure you're developing them so you're really in charge of the whole talent management process. So if you think of a lack of training in an organization, the employees are going to feel frustrated because they want to build up their skills and develop themselves, especially with like your millennials, right? They always want to build in their skills and know they're learning continuously. If you're not providing training, it's going to affect your productivity. Employees are just not as productive as they should be or can be. There can also be more injuries at work. So if you haven't done your health and safety training, of course, accidents can happen. So that could be costly and very serious. Poor customer service, of course, lack of training and they're not able to provide that proper customer service. It can lead to higher retention rates, as well as lack of morale. If others are picking up extra workload, it's overwhelming. It's frustrating for them. It's very costly to recruit and retrain new hires. Then there's also the legal compliance with mandatory training. Like Jandre has mentioned, you have your workplace violence and harassment training that needs to take place, your health and safety training, your AODA, which is your Accessibility for Ontario with Disabilities Act. And this is all mandatory training that needs to take place. So HR can also conduct a skills analysis where they look at your existing skills of your current workforce to determine your hiring and training needs. And this can be done through things like performance assessments that can be done through one-on-one interviews, questionnaires, just gathering information about your employee, their current skills and knowledge and competencies in the workplace. HR is able to design and facilitate leadership courses, so your adult-based learning. They can also provide learning modules for new hires, and of course, implement the mandatory training that's required. They can provide tools and resources when it comes to succession planning, and that's very often overlooked. But HR can put together like an individual development plans for employees, and as well as perhaps like a performance potential grid where you could kind of map out where the employees are sitting in your workforce, and where they lack potential, lack performance, and if they're high talent or high potentials, and also develop like a roadmap of learning for your employees. So training ultimately is just gonna keep your employees engaged and motivated. And your business is definitely, if you invest in training, you're investing in the growth of your business and of your employees.
Definitely agree with that. And I would say that, training and succession planning are things that employers should really be looking at very careful for the long-term success of their business over time. Because ultimately an employee who's well-trained, who's been, performing well at your business for a long time, that's an employee who you can count on, and you want to do as much as possible to retain those kinds of employees. With that said, there are circumstances where performance management is necessary and discipline is necessary, and HR is there to provide some of that as well. Now, this goes back to our discussion about the myths about HR and what does HR really do. Well, certainly discipline is part of HR's role, even though it may not be the favorite part of any HR person's role. Where performance management or discipline is needed to ensure performance, HR is really critical to avoid the issues escalating, more than they need to, and preserve a little bit of the workplace harmony and integrity with everybody, so that things are not being blown out of proportion, and they're not being minimized either. So you strike the right balance of what level of performance is expected and how to really present that to the employee. Because once a lawyer like me becomes involved in that process, that means the matter has become a little bit too contentious. So the key is that HR is there to apply the discipline and management while still maintaining that workplace, integrity and unity. Everybody's in one place. There's not external parties coming in, even if it is an external HR consultant. And the practical impact of not having HR or legal review in managing performance or discipline, for example, can be quite devastating and quite costly from time to time. There was recently a case that came out here in Ontario. It was a termination case where an employee was terminated after a number of years of service, and there was one error made in the termination letter. That error was basically, the termination didn't say that if the employee doesn't sign the termination letter, they would still get their employment standards minimums. Now, any HR professional would have been able to catch that error and would have been able to say, this could be costly here if we do that. But the employer here, unfortunately, didn't catch that error and ended up paying tens of thousands of dollars for one line in a termination letter that otherwise could have been avoided. So in that kind of a scenario, they're probably wishing they had somebody professional looking at it, and they probably will be in the future, but you don't want to learn that way. It's better to get stuff in line and lined up beforehand, so that you're not paying fees or penalties that you otherwise shouldn't be paying. So when it comes to performance management, compliance with the Employment Standards Act and with labor law, as far as any performance management goes, the last thing you want is human rights complaints coming out, or complaints about bad faith on the employer's side, because something is not being done correctly or something was maybe not represented as it should have been. HR can help you ensure that you're having those discussions and you're having those conversations in an appropriate manner with your employee. And that really takes us to the next point, which is employee engagement. So employee engagement is very important. And Denise, what can you tell us about HR's role in making sure employees remain engaged and perhaps prevent some of those discipline problems that can result?
Yeah, employee engagement always comes up if you're doing an employee opinion survey. One of the areas is also like rewards and recognition, and they want more praise, etc. So it's such an important function of HR to just check the culture and the temperature of your employees. And an organization can sometimes believe their biggest fear is losing customers, which is, of course, is a valid concern, but actually a little closer to home and can cost a lot of money, and that's their own disengaged employees. Mm-hmm. The things that it results in is like lower productivity. Employees just, they're just not motivated to work, which ultimately also then affects customer experiences. Employees, just will have decreased morale and company culture, failed business goals. So HR there is to provide the tools to measure employee engagement. And again, this could be done through an employee opinion survey or just one-on-one interviews and questionnaires. And really, they determine the reasons. And from that, the results they can provide a retention strategy for the business. HR can help boost the morale and motivation through initiatives. So, working in the organization, feeling, the culture out and the temperature, they know what can be done to improve morale within the company. And it could be things as basic as improving communication, just being more transparent about what's happening in the organization, keeping people up to date. Other areas or examples could be things like establishing a social committee and just having some fun events for employees to attend and feel that the company is doing something fun for them, and they're getting some little tips or rewards, like barbecues or gift cards for certain things, even like sales incentives. Other areas or examples could be implementing lunch and learn programs, a wellness program, rewards and recognition program, of course, and celebrating diversity. Is just some of the examples that one can do to just boost employee morale.
And certainly diversity has become a bigger and bigger topic in HR discussions, perhaps more so today than ever before. It's become a critical item to consider in recruiting, in retention, and with a view to having a workforce with a diverse skill set who can perhaps bring ideas to the table that you might not otherwise have in your business. So diversity and inclusion has become a big topic, especially among younger people who are expecting that their workplace will be diverse and inclusive. Among younger generations, I'm a millennial myself. I know I would prefer that my workplace is diverse and inclusive, and I'm sure members of Generation Z would also consider the same. Many individuals across Canada are looking for a diverse and inclusive environment. And it's one of those things that overall you can improve your business while improving your workforce's engagement, while improving their motivation at the same time. So really it can be a win-win. But diversity and inclusion today, it's not just about compliance with human rights legislation. We all know about human rights legislation across the country. Every province has some, no discrimination on the basis of age, on the basis of gender, or any of the other listed grounds. But it's also about removing barriers and encouraging innovative ideas in your business and encouraging diversity as a factor of your business rather than just discouraging a discrimination. Of course, we need to discourage discrimination. This is taking it a step further. The improvements to morale that can result from this, an included employee is more often a motivated employee. A person who feels excluded in the workplace isn't going to be happy showing up for work on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, depending on how excluded they feel, it may even be a liability or a risk for your business. So diversity and inclusion, diversity and inclusion policies, diversity and inclusion practices, they're a big topic these days. Certainly they can do plenty for a company's reputation, improve the company's reputation, and can be an advertising point as well for your company to say on your website, we're diverse, we're inclusive, we accept everybody regardless of any of the factors. And this can lead to, more satisfied employees, more satisfied customers. So to that point as well, and really talking about more recent developments in employment law, one development in human resources in particular has been the rise of data-driven human resources. So Denise, can you tell us a little bit about what are HR analytics and what are HRIS systems and what is data-driven HR really all about?
Yeah, thanks, Jandre. And some people might refer to the HR metrics or KPI, HR KPIs. There's various names, but there's data that one can pull, and some companies might have to do this manually if they don't have a good HR system in place. But if they do, it makes it easier to be able to pull that information from reports. So measuring different types of information will help the business owner figure out what is working well and then what improvements are needed. And these metrics will help you make better decisions when it comes to your people operations. So to give you some of the examples of information that one can track, is if there's a return of investment in the money that you spend, for instance, on training. Are they happier customers? Are your employees more productive? So just kind of measuring that data and information. If, for instance, your turnover is high, one can just look at all the various reasons why turnover is high and why people leave the company. So gathering that information can help you work out a strategic plan. Determine the reasons for leave of absence. Absenteeism levels, how long are they sick and what reasons are they sick, or what are the case may be, and really just determining how much money is spent on absenteeism. Perhaps there's even a lack of diversity in the organization. So with that data, one can ensure we have employment equity that we have to put in place, and making sure we have a diverse cultural team within the workplace. So HR really works with those results and puts together an action plan to address those areas of concern. With compensation and benefits, with minimum wage, HR would always ensure that minimum wage gets adjusted and other levels in the organization gets adjusted on an hourly basis. It affects your high up levels. And with a salary grid, they can also do a market analysis and just look at all your salaries within your organization, compared with similar jobs in the industry, and put together a salary grid, just to make sure you're competitive within your industry. And the goal, of course, is to improve the HR processes with these HR metrics that one is gathering.
And of course, also to improve the business itself. And thanks for mentioning minimum wage. I'd just like to make a reminder here that the minimum wage in Ontario is going up this year at the end, closer to the end of the year, this fall. So that's something that you may want to have your current HR department check if you've already got one. And Denise, can you give us a sort of a brief overview? So we've got a bit of a summary of what we've talked about so far, which is the 5 key reasons why HR is important for your business. So Denise, can you run us through just some of the important bits that we need to?
Yeah, I want to kind of say everything's important, but identifying the top 5. Firstly, recruiting top talent, and just based on your current and future needs of the business. Then the second one is owning the talent management process, and I spoke about earlier, is everything to do with attracting, developing, and retraining your employees. So important. With culture, company culture, it could be things like reviewing your benefits plan, how much training you're offering in the organization. We mentioned this earlier about transparency and communication. Looking at fair policies, fair practices. Do you have an open door policy where the employee can come to you and just talk to you about confidential information without them thinking that you're going to the senior management team? Having ethical policies in place. So they would review all of this. And even though, very often HR is viewed as, and even the myth, we're in the part of management, but we're really representing policies and procedures, but also protecting the employee when we're looking at that in terms of workplace violence, harassment, discrimination, etc. In terms of being compliant, and we spoke a lot about this, and that's really to reduce risk and cost to the organization. And then finally, aligning your HR goals with your business goals. So we would always look at what the business goals are and then plan anything to align our HR strategy with the business strategy. So examples would be if you have high turnover, we would look at, we would know to improve employee engagement, and we determine what the reasons are and try and put a plan in place. If skills are needed, we look at identifying gaps, in your current workforce in terms of competencies, knowledge, and then just working on training resources and a strategy to help improve that. So overall, HR, I want to say, is a very important function. and adds a great deal of value to your people and operations and, of course, your business goals.
Definitely. And I think that's really the bottom line here, is that HR is really supposed to be there to complement your business and to help it achieve goals. It's not there to be an obstacle or to be a cost sink, as is sometimes mythologized in among employees, among employers too, perhaps. HR is really there to make sure that your business is running its people side stuff in the best way possible to achieve its business goals. And there's really two types of HR that businesses can look at. You can look at hiring an internal HR department, an internal HR person, or you can look at external HR. In fact, I shouldn't have said or, because you could really look at having both. You know, some parts you may need to have an HR department that's in-house, but maybe there's work overflow or there's work that needs to be done that cannot be done in-house. Perhaps a more cost-effective solution is to have an HR consultant come on an as-needed basis for that. And perhaps the solution is, if you don't have an HR department at all, then an external HR consultant is ideal if you have a smaller business who maybe doesn't need someone there full-time. So Denise is just going to run us through a couple of advantages of external HR consulting, which is a service that we offer at Bridge Legal and HR Solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Jandre. So, I mean, some of the tasks are repetitive and straightforward and could possibly be done by somebody in-house. But with a full-time HR person, HR director, VP of HR, you know, there's extra costs with salaries and benefits. And with an outsourced HR consultant, the owner can determine just how much they want outsourced. So really just tailoring to their needs at that time. Then the second point is to more time to drive revenue. So the owners can really focus on what they do well, rather than having to deal with all these employee issues and paperwork. I think I mentioned to you, Jandre, the other day, a client was saying, just so tired of listening to employee complaints all day. And yeah, we are HR thinking, gosh, you know, yeah, you should be focused on the business and driving revenue and profit. And that's what you know, and that's what you do well. Yeah. So we have a team of experts in both HR and legal at Bridge Legal. And of course, we help then businesses to feel more comfortable knowing that we can address your needs. HR provides advice, but the owner then decides on the immediate focus or needs of the business at that time. The HR consultant will provide an unbiased eye and offer solutions. So this helps the owner just avoid all the politics and the worry about being caught up or wrapped up in emotions in making decisions. So HR can take care of that and just have an objective eye to that. And then also minimizing your risk when ensuring that you're compliant. We spoke about this quite a bit. So HR consultants at Bridge Legal work very closely with the employment lawyers. So we always have the latest updates with regards to legislative changes.
Exactly. And speaking of that topic, there are times when HR consultants and HR directors and HR folks at your business need to consult with an employment lawyer, such as myself. And employment lawyers are really there to pick up the legal side when it's necessary. So while HR can generally provide advice and guidance to owners on, you know, compliance with the laws and what the business need to do, sometimes HR needs to have a legal discussion with a lawyer. This can be to talk about minimum standards compliance, for example. It may seem straightforward, but vacation pay and vacations may actually be quite complicated depending on how they're set up in your business. As an example, other minimum standards such as exemptions from overtime, such as changes in case law, so termination clauses in contracts. Those kinds of items do need a legal eye to make sure that they are compliant, and to make sure that they are compliant in the future as well. So as Denise mentioned, having an up-to-date understanding of what the law is right now, the latest case law on various matters in employment is very important, and something that we can, an employment lawyer can provide to an HR consultant or HR internal department on a fairly regular basis. Lawyers may also need to be involved in issues such as workplace investigations. Maybe there's some cases where you need a lawyer to perform the workplace investigation. Maybe privilege is an issue. Maybe there's some other concerns that need to be looked at to make sure that everything is compliant. Accommodations is a big thing. So that's accommodations for disabilities, accommodations due to various family status, for for religions reasons as well. That's one other area of accommodation. An employment lawyer can be there to assist HR to make sure they know, what is the limit of the accommodation that we need to give here, and HR can be there to help the lawyer understand, what is the context that we're dealing in, and what is the workplace like, so you can get a more clear picture of, this is the type of accommodation that's necessary, and this is the extent that needs to be done by the business. That helps save you, some headaches. You don't have to maybe go as far as you had to in some cases, but it might also prevent some claims in cases where, maybe you didn't go as far as you had to, as far as the law states. So HR and legal can get together and make sure that accommodations are being done in an appropriate way, in a legal way. And privacy issues, employee privacy, employee data privacy becoming bigger by the year. There's still no privacy legislation in Ontario to really cover it, but there are some privacy torts in Ontario to consider. And other provinces in Canada do actually have privacy laws which employers need to follow, as well as the federal jurisdiction in regards to their employees. So that's one side of it where it's certainly right now the compliance side of it is not as big as it will be. And that's pretty much anywhere you look, there's going to be more compliance required on the privacy side as far as employment data goes in the future. And finally, terminations. I mean, some terminations can be fairly straightforward, an employee during the probationary period, or an employee who's, there's nothing too contentious there, maybe something that an HR department can handle on their own. But there are some cases where, it's either at the start, you want to get an opinion of what's the reasonable notice requirement, what is the termination clause enforceable, all those kinds of questions. Legal can definitely help out with that. But contextual analysis is always important. So that's where HR can come in and say, well, I mean, we can think back and look at the records and see this employee's had discipline records here and there. And this is just a process that, can go through between the lawyer and the HR person in the business to make sure that all the bases are covered. So when it comes to time to actually terminate an employee, it's handled with the right kind of care on behalf of the HR person, but also with the right legal backing to make sure that you've got it all lined up. And there's also circumstances where you've already done the termination and the employee comes back with a demand letter from another lawyer. At that point, you're more than likely going to have to get a lawyer involved to make sure that the matter settles with the least amount of cost to your business as possible. So really, HR and employment lawyers work hand in hand on a regular basis to make sure that your business is covered. HR does the day-to-day and can make sure that your business is managing its employees properly and employees are happy and all of that. But legal is really there to ensure that at the bottom line, everything is being done in accordance with the requirements. And yeah, I believe that takes us to the end of our webinar. So any last points you'd like to make, Denise, or?
Yeah, you know what, as you said, we work so closely together. And if you have HR that's taking care of all those needs, when we do go to a lawyer, it's hopefully just for some smaller things and not all the big items, because we have already put all the processes and practice in place that we should have had. So yeah, absolutely. But for sure, we do work very closely as a team.
Great. Well, with that, we'd like to thank you all for participating in our webinar. If you've got any questions and any questions that we received during the course of this webinar, we will respond back to you in the next few days. For any further questions, you can feel free to contact us at our email address that's listed on this page. You can also feel free to call us at 647-794-5442. We're really glad to have you all join us, and we hope to see you again at some of our future webinars. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.